All right, should be good to go.
All right, all right. If you could start sharing our slides.
Hold on. All right, can everybody see that?
There we go. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first community town hall of 2024. We can go to the next slide, Danny. Yes, welcome. It is a pleasure to be with all of you this evening. This is our first community town hall of the year. We welcome all community members to our community town hall. Just to give you a little bit of information, we hold 2 town halls every month. Now, the first Tuesday of each month are our commissioner public meetings. And this is where our commissioners discuss and hear public comment on commission business. The third Tuesday of every month, like tonight, is our community town hall. And this is where we invite speakers, community groups, or organizations to discuss policing issues, to talk about community resources, and any concerns that the community may have. And we just ask if anyone in attendance tonight has a question about any commission business. We ask that you ask those questions during the first Tuesday of every month, when it might be more appropriate. As tonight, we ask that all questions and comments be related to tonight's topic. Next slide. Okay. So if you're unfamiliar, CPOC has 6 commissioners. This slide here just lists them and the different districts that they come from. Our commissioners have a background and come from different walks of life. They are helping us shape the vision for this agency. And our commission chair is Jolly Hatchett from the 12th district. We have Rosara Torres-Thomas from the 15th district. Hakeem P.A. is from the 16th. Hassan Bennett is from the 19th district. Elder Melanie DeBose is from the 35th district. And John Solomon is from the 39th. This slide here just lists all of their contact information if you ever want to send an email or reach out to ask them a question or to learn more about them. We also have several of our staff members in attendance this evening as well. Next slide. And so, as you can see, this is just a couple of snapshots of photos of some of our commissioners and some of our staff members at different events that we've had throughout the year. But as you can see, all of us are very active in the community, and we hope to continue that in 2024. Next slide, please. So before we get started with our speakers and our esteemed guests that we've asked to join us tonight, it is Stalking Awareness Month, so that is tonight's topic. But we did want to spend just a little bit of time just giving you some information and details about 2023. And that year in review, some of the things that we worked on, some of the things we're proud of, and a little bit of some of our goals for this year. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Auditing and Monitoring, Janine Zajac, to take it from here.
Thanks, Celia. Hi, everyone. I'm Janine. As Celia said, the Director of the Auditing and Monitoring Unit. So I just want to talk a little bit about what our unit does and share some of our accomplishments and some goals for 2024. So Auditing and Monitoring Unit does a lot of work around internal affairs at the police department. We do auditing of closed investigations that internal affairs has completed, and we're checking those investigations for thoroughness and quality and objectivity. And we also do some monitoring of complaints against police. So that involves us attending interviews and paying attention to how the investigation is unfolding. We also do audit projects that allows us to tackle any number of different topics within policing in Philadelphia and bring our skill set as auditor monitors to those projects and help other units in our office with projects as well. It's myself as the director. We have 1 senior auditor monitor and 4 auditor monitors, 3 of whom just started last week. So it was a big week of growth for our unit, and very excited to see what we can do with all of our new manpower. You can go to the next slide. So the year in review for our unit, a big accomplishment for us was releasing part 2 of the collaborative reform of PBI report. So that tracks some progress on reforms to the discipline process at the police department, showed some progress, sort of a progress report of those recommendations and implemented reforms, and also made a few new recommendations. So we're very proud of our continuing work with PBI and the police department there. We also spent a lot of time honing our methods of analysis for our auditing, as we're looking at these complaints against police, understanding what data we want to collect, how we want to collect it, making sure our data collection is clean. That's been a big piece of the work that we do, and we continue to do these audits every day and make our process as good as it can be. We have a good data set that we have begun to analyze and have started drafting a report. So hopefully that will be able to be released in the near future. We've also continued work on our body-worn camera projects. So there's 2 projects that are ongoing related to body-worn cameras, one related to procedural justice and one a compliance audit project. And that work continues to evolve and has been possible through our relationship building and our process development within the unit. So we're really proud of that work. And those projects have been presented at some conferences in 2023. So that includes the NACOL, National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. We did a presentation there, and also at the American Society of Evidence-Based Policing. So we're able to share our work with our colleagues around the country and sort of pick their brains about how we can keep improving our own work. Next slide, please. This is just a screenshot. We're super proud of our senior auditor, Kimmy, on the bottom right. She presented with our former research analyst, Josh, and Lieutenant Kelly Robbins of the police department and their academic partner, Eric, at the NACOL conference on their work on body-worn cameras. So this is a screenshot of that presentation. Very proud of them. Next slide. And some of our goals for 2024, again, the audit report that we've been working on for a while, I'm really pushing to get that out soon so we can show everyone all this work we've been doing and how we've been doing our reviews. We also want to increase the volume of audits that we're doing and do some more regular reporting to make sure people are seeing the work that we're doing, and we're sharing some good feedback with the department as well. We want to formalize some monitoring processes. So when we are attending interviews in internal affairs, we are really making the best use of our time and figuring out how we could be a good partner in these investigations. And continuing this audit, the body-worn camera audit project, making it a unit-wide project so we can collect even more data and have more to say about body-worn camera compliance at the police department. Next slide. And I'll talk a little bit about the policy unit as well. This is led by Anastasia McCarthy. She's the director of policy. She wasn't able to make it, but I'm happy to share her highlights and goals for the coming year. So the main functions of the policy unit are reviewing police department policies and procedures, and then making recommendations for any best practices or areas that could be improved. Another big project within the unit is reviewing charging decisions at PBI regarding officer misconduct. So when officers are found to have committed misconduct, some policy staff go to PBI and have second set of eyes and some oversight over the discipline charging process, which is a really great step forward for oversight in our city. Again, Anastasia is the director. We have 2 senior policy analysts and 3 policy analysts in the unit. The year in review, Anastasia led her team in standardizing reviews of police processes like the PBI charging reviews. They issued policy recommendations to the department about a non-emergency crime reporting unit. So I think they're waiting for some feedback on that from the department. They've spent a lot of time trying to create great content for our website and our blog to distill complex information about the department and their processes so that our constituents and the residents of Philadelphia can really understand how some of these complicated things with the police department work. So I highly recommend checking out all of those posts. And the mediation program continues to be a big focus of the policy unit as an alternative dispute resolution process for complaints against police. and they've been screening complaints and trying to get that process up and running and making sure that complaints are suitable for the process and are able to move forward. So that was a big piece of their work in 2023. Next slide. Thanks. And some highlights here. These are some examples of the work that the policy unit has been able to publish and put out on the website. Non-emergency crime reporting, as we mentioned, and they're also members of different working groups and committees in professional groups nationally and locally, such as the NACOL Training and Education Standards Committee, the Philadelphia Legal Eviction Action Team, for example. Next slide. Some goals for the policy unit. They really want to focus on community-driven policy projects. So any ideas from the community for policy work that our office should tackle, they are definitely open to that and interested in that. Continuing to drive the mediation program forward and making sure that everyone around the city knows about it, police department and residents included. So figuring out how to best spread the word about mediation. And additionally, increasing the use of data to make really good data-driven recommendations and tracking the recommendations that we do make to ensure that they are properly implemented and understanding the effectiveness of them. So that's all things that the policy unit's looking forward to in the coming year. And I think I'll pass it off to Anthony now. Is that correct, Celia?
That's correct.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Anthony Arachi, and I'm going to be giving you the year in review for investigations tonight, as our Director of Investigations, Jameson, was otherwise engaged. So a quick overview of our investigations unit functions: that independent administrative investigations into allegations of officer misconduct brought through the Citizens Complaints Against Police. Jameson has been responding to and monitoring PPD officer-involved shootings, and monitoring high-profile police incidents. Right now, Jameson is essentially the driving force behind standing up this unit. This has been a long time coming, and there's going to be a lot of big things this year. We're currently hiring a chief investigator, and that'll be the first step into our investigative build-out. Next slide. The 2023 year in review. CPOC responded to 15 officer-involved shootings in 2023, and we also sent a criminal referral to the district attorney's office for review. Currently conducting after-action reviews of 2 high-profile, high-level incidents, and the director of investigations, Jameson, was featured in several articles and news segments about CPOC's investigative role. We've assisted with supervision of auditing in the monitoring unit and developing a training curriculum for investigative staff. And some of our goals for this year is to continue to build relationships and rapport with PPD leadership, internal affairs unit, and other law enforcement entities. We're trying to increase staffing of the unit by adding several more investigators by 2025, and we're trying to establish ourselves as a leader in public safety and in police misconduct investigations. And I'm going to hand this off to Talia.
All right, I'm going to take it from here. So I'll talk a little bit about CPOC's Community Outreach Training and Education Unit, which is led by myself, Talia Grimmage. I'm the Director of Outreach and Constituent Services. I am joined by one Outreach and Training Manager, Damon Green, and we have Julian Jordan, who's on with us tonight as well. He is our Community Outreach and Constituent Services Specialist. Very excited. We have also hired a bilingual Community Outreach and Constituent Services Specialist who's going to be starting with us next week. And we are currently hiring our Social Media and Public Relations Officer. So that is sort of the makeup, or will be the makeup of this unit. So some of the things that we work on, we conduct all of the outreach and engagement functions for the agency, in addition to support and help from some of our other staff, and of course our commissioners who come out and join us at different events. We are responsible for planning and executing our monthly town halls, community meetings, and our discussions. We provide community education on different policing issues. We speak at community events. Something we're really proud of is we do presentations to the police recruits and at the Civilian Police Academy. We assist with our public relations functioning and our social media management. We advocate and engage with diverse communities, and we promote transparency and accountability in policing. And of course, we work to improve community trust through learning and relationship building. Next slide. Okay, so this here just gives you a good example of just our outreach footprint for 2023. And so with many city agencies that are tasked with doing outreach, there are specific metrics and a number of events that you are responsible for attending. So the managing director's office asks that agencies attend at least 20 events each fiscal year. And so that fiscal year runs from July to June. These two graphics here represent January 1st, 2023 to December 19th, 2023. And so as you can see, CPOC outreach team, we have already surpassed our goal just for this fiscal year and beyond. So we have to do at least 20. And as you can see, we have done at least 104 different events. 86 of those have been in person. And so the first graphic here just kind of breaks down the variety of different events that we've gone to. So we have some of them have been protest monitoring, they've been officer accommodations, some of them have been, the majority of them have been community engagement, raising awareness of CPOC, and for education and training. So this really shows the reason that we are at the various events. The second graphic here, which is a picture of Philadelphia, it shows you the different areas of the city that we have been to, and it's color coded, so it tells you whether or not it was a city department event, whether it was something that was organized by a community group, whether it's something that we hosted, if it was the police department, and so forth. And so this gives us a really good visual of where we've been. As you can see, there are many areas in the city that we still need to get to. And so this is just a good way for you to see just the outreach team's footprint. Next slide. And so just this graphic here also just gives you a good idea to see how many events we're doing in a particular month. As you can imagine, sometimes in the winter months, things slow down, especially with in-person events if the weather's not great. But during the spring and summer, things generally tend to pick up. But you can just see how often we are attending things throughout the calendar year. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to focus a little bit more on some of the specific things that we've done with community engagement. We were very, very fortunate to be able to moderate, organize, or we were featured on at least 4 panels in 2023. One of them was a panel with some of our NACO partners. We got together with oversight agencies from different cities in the country to talk about some of the commonalities and similarities that we're all seeing in this work. We were a part of a panel on, community trauma and violence. We moderated a panel with some of the international participants of the Mandela Washington Fellowship Program, and we hosted a Know Your Rights in Law Enforcement panel, which our commission chair, Jolly Hatchett, was responsible for moderating. We also had 4 events where we did some protest monitoring, and they are listed here. We're hoping in 2024, as more groups or different people are aware that that's a function of this agency, that if there is going to be a protest or some sort of gathering, people can reach out, let us know when it is, and we will be on site to monitor that event. And we also had 6 community movie nights. Now, people may wonder, it's Oversight, why would we do movie nights? It is really important for us to engage with the community in a variety of ways, whether it's social justice, civil rights, criminal justice. There are a lot of topics and issues that intersect with policing. And so it's important for us to talk about some of these issues and concerns with the community. As you can see, a couple of these here we did with our youth. We showed Into the Spider-Verse with some of the kids at the King Sesson Rec Center. We had Transformers, Rise of the Beasts. We showed, to some of the youth. And then, of course, we read Tustin Rec in October, showing the Haunted Mansion, just giving young people an opportunity to get together to do something positive and safe. We're happy to be a part of things like that. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're also a part of two working groups. One is the Interagency Civil Rights Task Force, which is spearheaded by the Philadelphia Commission for Human Relations. This is a working group of government and law enforcement partners that get together to do networking, to talk about civil rights and incidents of bias or hate crimes or things that they may be seeing. We're also part of the Illegal Eviction Action Team, which is a group of people in the city that get together to combat illegal evictions and to provide resources to tenants and educate landlords on what their rights and responsibilities are. Of course, we also do our in-person town hall meetings. We speak at, PPD captains' town halls, and we give presentations to community groups if they reach out and ask us to come and talk about our agency or talk about Oversight. And over here, you can just see, this is just, we give a training presentation to the Civilian Police Academy. We have been added as a standard part of their curriculum. The CPA is a group of community members that get together at the police academy to learn about policing policies and procedures. And the program sort of returns them to their communities as, ambassadors to talk to their community about policing. And so we provide a oversight training to the attendees. And we also talk to each recruit class before they graduate about oversight, the ways that they will encounter CPOC, what oversight is, what oversight is not. And it gives us the opportunity to talk to some of the recruits before they receive their standard where they're going to be placed in the community. So we're able to talk to them before they go to their respective districts. Next slide. Okay. And of course, we do community and interaction advocacy, and we raise awareness about our agency, what we do, ways that we can support the community. This is just a couple of snapshots of some different things that we've done. There are photos here from our time with the Mexican consulate. We have some of our officer commendations that we've done. There's a photo from a time when we were speaking at the Logan Civic Association about CPOC. Of course, we did our Know Your Rights panel. The 19th Police District had a youth pop-up shop, so CPOC was able to sponsor and take care of the fees for each of these young people that wanted to start their own business. It's important to give back and to really, be a source of support to our young people. We were a part of one of the police district art camps this summer. We engaged with different groups. We have photos here from a town hall we did with Colors and Philly Black Pride. And there's a photo here from a time where we had our Mandela Washington Fellow. Every year we get a fellow from the continent of Africa, and they come and they're with us for the entire summer, and we give them sort of an immersion in policing and city government. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of our goals for 2024. Of course, we are always interested in increasing CPOC's people's awareness of our agency and increasing our visibility online through social media engagement. We want to continue to work with our elected officials to provide exemplary constituent services and assisting with quality of life concerns that the community may have. We'd like to expand our outreach unit by adding more staff, specifically staff who are bilingual, so that we can be more accessible to different communities in the city. We want to increase our training and education functions by, partnering with different agencies who may want to have us come out and talk to them. And of course, one thing that we've been talking about is really, as we're growing, increasing the accessibility of complaint intake. So with more staff, we will have more ability to be visible in different communities based on need. So if we're seeing that maybe a lot of complaints come in a specific district, we may be able to have maybe certain days a week where we're visible in that district to take complaints. We've been asked about volunteer opportunities from community members. So we'd like to create some opportunities for people to volunteer with us. And just really create spaces for the community to voice their concerns to help us shape oversight in the city. And so some of the pictures you see here is from one of our events where we ask community members to write down what oversight means to them. And so you can see some people wrote, police oversight is necessary. Police oversight is community engagement. Oversight is safety for all. It's accountability. Oversight, it stops police brutality. Oversight is essential, and police oversight is support. And so we really need our community to just talk to us and tell us what our priorities should be, because we represent all of you. And you can go to the next slide, Danny. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Julian, who's going to introduce our guest for this evening and take it from here.
Thank you, Talia. So January is Stalking Awareness Month. And so this discussion this evening is going to include references of domestic violence. So if anyone may be triggered by that, we just wanted to let everyone know so that participant discretion is advised. If anyone's uncomfortable with that, we totally understand. If anyone does have to leave because they may be triggered, we would absolutely have no problem sharing tonight's resources with you if that is more comfortable for you, whatever works for everyone. But we just wanted to make that be known. We're going to have 3 special guests with us this evening that have an abundance of knowledge and experience in this space. The first is Elizabeth Pride. Elizabeth is a project manager with the Office of Domestic Violence Strategies. The second is Michael Gallagher. Michael is a law enforcement specialist with Women Against Abuse. And finally, we have Tyrone Green with us. Tyrone is an investigator with PPD's Special Victims Unit. Okay. So,
Thank you.
Please.
Oh, were you going to finish anything?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, Julian, and thanks for having me at your town hall. My name is Liz Pride. I'm the Senior Project Manager with the Office of Domestic Violence Strategies. It's a very long name for a very small office. There are just 2 of us, and we are located within the Philadelphia city government with the goal to help the city's health and human services agencies improve their response to intimate partner violence in the city of Philadelphia. So mostly I'm working with other professionals, but I did used to work with survivors of intimate partner violence at the Women Against Abuse Legal Center alongside Mike. So it's nice to be here with Mike today. And I worked for Women Against Abuse for about 7 years, directly with survivors, helping them prepare for court, and very often with people who had experienced stalking. So I'm glad to talk about this important topic today. And Mike, why don't you introduce yourself too? You're on mute.
That'll help. My name is Mike Gallagher. I work at Women Against Abuse. I've been there for 16 years now as their police liaison. I'm a retired detective from Philadelphia. I worked at Northwest Detectives for 10 years and spent some time in narcotics before that. And as in the project that I work on now, we get all the domestic violence police reports, and we go over them and we reach out to people with high lethality issues. And stalking is a big part of that program that we work with. And like Liz said, we worked right across from each other's cube for several years, and that's where we get to from now. We also do training with the police academy too. So that's one thing we have in common with this group here too.
And you can go to the next slide. So before we get into talking about stalking, I'm just going to briefly talk about why abusive relationships are different from other relationships. And I also will add on to Julian's trigger warning note. I don't think anything that we're going to talk about is too scary or graphic, but obviously the topic of intimate partner violence is very common, and it is normal to, if you have close experiences, to feel either triggered or anxious about information. So do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, either turn off camera or take a break or just revisit the information later. But also I would encourage anyone to ask questions, but just remember that this is being recorded and it's also public. So be careful about the type of information that you ask. Be mindful to not share identifying information about other people. Just a note on that. So you can go to the next slide. So domestic violence or intimate partner violence is different from just a bad relationship. Unhealthy or bad relationships are characterized by people who have basically an equal amount of power, but they have not a great dynamic. And that might be a dynamic that's very toxic. There may be high conflict. They may even be violent with one another, but ultimately both of those people have the same amount of power in the relationship. They might decide that they want to try to work things out and go to couples counseling. And if that doesn't work for them, they could decide that ending the relationship is ultimately going to be best. It may be very messy or painful, as often breakups are, but ultimately when those people are separate from one another, the conflict also ends. And after a while, probably a lot of the conflict will end. But in an abusive relationship, go to the next slide, this is characterized by one person using a pattern of behavior to maintain and gain power and control in the relationship. So they are not equal in the relationship. One person is using power and control over the other person. And so that pattern of behavior that they use to control and have power over that person can be a lot of things. It may include physical violence, but it all goes into that one person having the power in the relationship. For this type of relationship, couples counseling could be actually dangerous, because if you want to be honest with your therapist and then you're still going home to a person who's hurting you or threatening you, that's not a very safe situation to share information about yourself. And then often ending the relationship can also be dangerous, because that abusive partner is trying to be in power and in control of the relationship. And if they feel that their partner is trying to separate from them, or their partner is trying to gain some autonomy in the relationship, that person may start escalating their tactics. So what they've been doing before may become even more dangerous. If you go, and just a note on this, it is very common, and it can be lethal. Oftentimes, especially near where someone has separated or when they're getting ready to separate, that abuse can escalate to homicide or attempted homicide. It's common. It can happen in any kind of relationship. It's not just men and women. It's not just heterosexual relationships. It can be truly anyone. So if you have a picture in your mind of what a victim of domestic violence looks like, it's not necessarily that. You can go to the next slide. So I think most people think of domestic violence or intimate partner violence, and they think of physical violence. And that can be part of that pattern of abuse: hitting, pushing, slapping, as well as more dangerous behaviors like using weapons, strangulation, or coerced or forced sexual contact. But it also often includes non-physical behaviors that contribute to that power and control in the relationship. So putting someone down, controlling who they can spend time with, who they have access to, threatening suicide, making them feel like they're going crazy. All of those things can help that one person maintain the power and control in the relationship. And financial abuse, so interfering with their employment, childcare, stealing or controlling money, ruining credit, all of that can make it so that that victim in the relationship is more reliant on the abusive partner. And then there's another type of or category of abusive behaviors. If you go to the next slide, as our focus today is stalking. So stalking is defined as a pattern of behavior directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to feel fear. It's a very technical definition. And you may notice that pattern of behavior very similar to the definition of intimate partner violence, that pattern of behavior used by one person to gain and maintain power and control. Stalking is a pattern of behavior directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to feel fear. And the crime code actually includes to fear for bodily injury or substantial emotional distress. So stalking can be a lot of different things. It's a lot of different behaviors, but it's important to remember that it is a crime. So it's not just a one-time event, running into your ex unexpectedly, unpleasant, but running into your ex all of the time at all of the places that just seem like this is not a coincidence. And actually they're trying to interact with you every single time they see you. And whatever you try to do to keep them from knowing where you're going doesn't seem to be working. That indicates that that person is engaging in a pattern of behavior to cause me distress. If you go to the next slide, stalking is very common. Both stalking and intimate partner violence are common. You can experience intimate partner violence and not experience stalking, and vice versa. You can experience stalking from someone who's not a current or former intimate partner, but it's very common that these two cross over. 40% of stalking victims are stalked by someone who they are or were in a relationship with. And it can happen at any point in the relationship. So you may think, well, they've broken up. This is when stalking happens. It does, that does happen, but it also can occur within the relationship. And it may be one of the behaviors that's trying to maintain that power and control in the relationship. It's also, while stalking might not involve physical contact, it often means that that stalker is very controlling, very jealous, very possessive, and that behavior can really frequently escalate. And one study found that of women who were killed by an intimate partner, or almost killed by an intimate partner, 85% of those who had experienced an attempted murder, or 76% who had been murdered, had experienced stalking in the previous year. So it is a really important indicator of a high level of dangerousness, high level of dangerousness of that stalker. You can go to the next slide. So with stalking, context matters. It criminalizes what is otherwise non-criminal behavior. So I'm going to give an example. If you go to the next slide. Your coworker, Angela, got a delivery of flowers and a card at your workplace in the middle of the day. The card says, "Happy birthday, baby. I will always love you." Now Angela is upset and can't focus. And so on the outside, if you have no context, you think card, birthday flowers, birthday card, those are objectively lovely things. What a nice message. Why would this be upsetting? But the context is what makes stalking a crime. So if you go to the next slide, if you know 6 months ago, Angela broke up with her partner, her ex started sending her harassing messages and used different numbers and social media profiles to contact her. She then changed her number and locked down all of her social media profiles, but still got suspicious friend requests and messages. And last month, she moved to a new neighborhood. She also transferred to a different work location. She was careful to keep all of this information private and rarely goes out by herself. And today she got the card and flowers. So that context, the message that Angela is actually getting in that card is not "Happy birthday, I love you," but "I found you. You can't hide from me. I will find you wherever you can go. You can try to hide, but it's not going to work." So that's that pattern of behavior, the messages, the phone calls, and then probably following her at some point to find out her location, or at least her work location, that is part of that stalking behavior that's very frightening and causing Angela to feel distress. If you go to the next slide, there are a few categories of kind of what types of behaviors count as stalking. And I think, again, like the categories of abusive behaviors, most people think stalking and think of, following someone or using technology like smart devices to track their location, monitoring what they do online. And that may be part of it, but it also can include these other categories of behaviors like life invasion, this like feeling of no matter what I do, this person is always around, always contacting me. I can't have like any breathing room for them. Intimidation, which can include property damage, blackmail, threats of self-harm or forced confrontation. So like, you must talk to me, going up to them in the middle of the store. You've been ignoring my calls. You have to talk to me. You have to talk to me. That like you're forcing confrontation to happen. And interference can also be part of stalking behavior. So like if that may include posting intimate images without that person's consent online, trying to spread rumors about them and ruin their reputation, and even physical attacks. So all of these things can be part of that pattern of behavior, or as the law defines it, course of conduct that it make up what stalking is. So if reporting a crime, thinking more broadly about what stalking is, that not just following, not just putting, you know, a block on your phone to keep the messages away, but all of these other things, did it include that? If somebody's thinking about stalking in this more whole way, they may actually identify more behaviors if they're not just focusing on like the big ones that seem a little bit more obvious. So if you go to the next slide, this is actually a template that is from stalkingawareness.org, which has a lot of really good materials and resources for people who want to learn more about stalking or who are experiencing stalking and want to learn about resources. And so this is one way that someone could try to log the experiences that they're having, especially if you're thinking about stalking is not just one behavior, but it's all of these things adding up together. Recording them can be really helpful because you might feel overwhelmed and forget things, but also can be really helpful if you're then reporting them to the police and you can say, I've got all my information right here and I'm very organized about it. So this is one strategy that many people who have experienced stalking use, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in a template like this. Some people will just, you know, send themselves an email and that email chain is what works for them, or they use the Notes app on their phone, whatever really works for them that's secure and is a way to record that information can be really helpful. But just if you can't see very well, this image includes the date, the time, a brief description of the incident, the location of the incident. So in these examples, this is online, it's not in person. So the location of the incident is Instagram. The witness name, no witness, but there is a screenshot of whatever happened. And if somebody's making a report, then they could add that in the last column. If you go to the next slide, there are ways to get help from stalking. I'll turn it over to Mike.
Okay, thank you, Liz. First, I'd just like to mention that as Liz went over there with Angela, when I first encountered stalking, it was from somebody who had flowers left on their car, and they made a police report, and they made several other reports about incidents that, as one incident, it didn't amount to anything. But when you start connecting the dots, and you found out that she had moved from one location because of encounters with this person, and he followed her, it made sense. After putting all the evidence together and submitting for an arrest warrant for this person, they were arrested 3 times in less than a year for the same charges of stalking. The person did 3.5 years in jail for these crimes of stalking. They maxed out because they didn't want to be bothered by any kind of probation afterwards, so that they could continue their actions, and they did. And it's been an ongoing situation where this person will pop into this other person's life. It might be every other year or several years in between, but the person's always living on edge because they never know when that person's going to encounter them again. It might be just a simple thing that's moved outside the front of their house or anything, but it keeps you in that state of alert and super aware of your surroundings, so that you're just always in fear of that person coming back and encountering you again. There's a couple different ways you can deal with stalking, and as Liz said, the one would be to file for a protection from abuse order. That's going through a civil matter. Women Against Abuse at the Legal Center can help you with that filing. We have people that work in the filing unit at family court. And if you're issued a protection order, any violation of that protection order can be turned from a civil event to a criminal event at that point, and the person can face some kind of punishment from the courts for that. The other way is to go straight to the criminal filing, and that would be just to call 911 and report it to the police. Part of that, when you're doing that, I would advise people to do part of what Liz is showing you, to keep a log. It's important that you gather all the evidence and you try and string the events together so that it gives a better picture to the police officer or the detective that's going to be investigating the incident. In making that report, it's also helpful if you tell the police officer that responds to the call that it is a stalking event, so that it's not taken down as just some kind of harassment. The stalking event makes sure it goes to a detective for further investigation, and the detective will follow up, gather the evidence, and see about submitting it to the district attorney's office to get an arrest warrant. We have an active investigator here that can talk more about that process, how that goes on. But Women Against Abuse has advocates in the criminal court also that can support the people in these incidents. They'll go to court as advocates in the criminal or in the civil that can help out. And our phone number over at the Legal Center is 215-686-7082. 215-686-7082, Monday through Friday, or else you can call the domestic violence hotline, and that number is 1-866-723-3014, and they can give you some advice, and they can follow up with that with the Legal Center on a Monday to Friday basis. The hotline is a 24/7 hotline, and they can give you immediate safety tips on where to go and how to proceed. And when you file for a protection from abuse order, that's at family court where you go to, and it's a Monday through Friday process. It's from 8 to 4, or if you go after hours, you can go to the Criminal Justice Center, the 13th and Filbert, and file there on after hours or on weekends and holidays. That's about it for now. So,
And just to note that the emergency filing site at the Criminal Justice Center, that is only if the incident has very recently occurred and it cannot wait until the next business day. So most people are going to be routed to file if they want to file a protection from abuse order. Most people will file at family court.
thank you, Liz. I should have added that it's not a good place to file for stalking incidents. It would usually be in a regular family court during regular business hours.
Great. I think,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna,
Oh, okay. Thank you, Liz and Mike. Before we open up the floor for any questions that folks may have for Liz and Mike, we have a couple questions, one for each of our guests. The first question is for Liz. If someone is on the fence about whether someone else's behavior may or may not be stalking, what would you recommend that they do first?
So I would recommend first trusting the gut feeling, that if the behavior feels like it is not good and it's making you feel afraid, that is a legitimate feeling and not something that you should just ignore. But also talking to an advocate is a great option. And especially if people feel anxious about talking to other people in their lives. And often people, if they don't have a lot of experience in intimate partner violence, they might not know that much about stalking. So calling the Philadelphia Domestic Violence Hotline, or calling the Women Against Abuse Legal Center and saying like, hey, I'm experiencing this. I don't know if it's stalking, but like, I just want to, if I can tell you about it, can you tell me what your assessment is? And advocates on those lines can absolutely talk to somebody about that. They don't have to be definite in what they're experiencing, but they can talk to them and talk through like, yes, this does sound like stalking, and like these are things that you could keep in mind and what your options are. So definitely don't necessarily let go of that if you're not feeling sure, but always reach out and talk to someone if you can.
Thank you so much. And then the second question, that's for Mike. We hear a lot about resources for victims and survivors of domestic violence, but what steps can someone take if they feel that their own behavior may be problematic? And are there resources available for suspected abusers?
Yes, there is. There's a couple of different organizations in Philadelphia. Liz, I might need your help here. The one was Menergy. They've changed their name since.
Cordea.
That's it. I'm sorry. Thank you. They can call there. I don't have a number available for them right now, but they're helpful in counseling for possible an abuser or somebody that might think they have a problem.
Yeah, so I just shared in the chat to Danny, so hopefully you can get this link out to people, but there's a list on Women Against Abuse's website. Women Against Abuse does not work with the person who does abuse, but there are organizations that do, that primarily are Cordea and the Joseph J. Peters Institute, or JJPI. They both have programs for people who have concerns about their behavior. Sometimes people are court mandated to attend those programs, but people can also just choose to attend if they feel like they're concerned about their behavior.
Thank you so much. And it looks like we have a question or a comment from the audience. So let's go with our first question.
Yeah, so it looks like Commissioner Thomas wanted to ask a question, and if anybody else has questions, you can either send them in the chat or raise your hand and we can unmute you.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I have a lot of questions, and one of the questions that I do want to ask Ms. Pride and Mr. Gallagher, in regards to police officer involved in domestic violence, how is that being handled, and how long have you been with the domestic violence unit, and how long have you been, Mr. Gallagher, with Women Against Abuse?
Liz, well, I'll go first here and just say that I've been working with Women Against Abuse for 16 years now.
16 years. Okay. And Ms. Pride?
So I've worked in the Office of Domestic Violence Strategies for about 2 years, but I
2
also worked
years.
at Women Against Abuse for about 7 years.
Okay. May I share with you a little background about myself? I am a survivor of domestic violence, and I'm a survivor of police officer involved in domestic violence. And in the past, and I'm going back more than 24 years, there has been a history that women like myself and other women who try to get protection orders from abuse by their abuser, who happens to be police officers, were not able to get that protection order because of the position these officers hold. I want to know, how is Women Against Abuse, and how is your office handling this? Now, I can go a little further. Several years ago, was in a court system with one survivor against a police officer from the 25th district. And for 2 years, she tried to get a protection order. And for 2 years, she was denied that protection order because of the position this officer held. So I would like to know, in your position, and Mr. Gallagher, your position, how is Women Against Abuse and how is your office handling when it does involve a police officer? Because I believe everything that you are sharing with us is outstanding, but what does a woman do when it does involve a police officer?
So that's definitely very complicated when, generally the advice is, if you're experiencing a crime, report to the police. If that crime involves a police officer, that's a layer that makes it a little bit more complicated. And so I would definitely suggest that people get connected to advocates who can help them, like the Women Against Abuse Legal Center. If you go to the previous slide, Philadelphia Legal Assistance is also a legal center that does family law related to domestic violence. And so having somebody, even before you file something or early on, can be helpful in just figuring out the order in which you decide to do something. So that might be helpful in saying like, all right, this is a complicated issue to report to the police or complicated to file a protection from abuse order about. So let's talk to a lawyer and have them give the best information about how to go about that. It's never a guarantee, but they can give a lot of really helpful information and their own assessment and how to go about it in a way that will be both safe for the person or safer for the person who is filing, but also considering the complicating factors that make the case potentially more dangerous. And then I will note that my office, the Office of Domestic Violence Strategies, we do not work directly with survivors. We're not a direct service agency. So we work in training mostly health and human services agencies like Homeless Services, the Department of Public Health, but we do a little bit of work also with criminal justice because of the crossover. But for people who are looking directly for help, the Women Against Abuse Legal Center or Philadelphia Legal Assistance are great places to contact. And then on the next slide, there's a link there, like a shortened link. So bit.ly/PHLDV resources is a list of all of the resources or a lot of the resources in Philadelphia for survivors who are looking for help in Philadelphia.
I thank you for sharing this with us and sharing this with me. Mr. Gallagher, you were not with Women Against Abuse 24 years ago when I personally tried to get help from Women Against Abuse. And because I was denied the help because who my ex-husband was, a lot of women who are survivors, a police officer, they find it difficult to reach out to organizations like Women Against Abuse, like Lutheran House, like Women in Transition, because they are not being heard and they are not getting the same protection as anyone else who tries to get that stalking protection or that domestic violence protection order. So I wanted to be transparent with our community. I wanted to be forthcoming, and I wanted to, not shove things underneath the rug, that it is very difficult to get that protection order if you are a girlfriend, a wife of a police officer. And this is something we must share with them, because once they go to Women Against Abuse or Women in Transition or Lutheran House or Esperanza, they are not able to get that protection order because of that police officer and the position that he holds. So sadly, I can speak on Women Against Abuse because I was not given the help because of who my ex-husband was. So domestic violence has caused me 2 retinal detachment, but I'm still here to support, to help, to speak out in regards to domestic violence, and also involving police officer involved with domestic violence. I am also an award-winning author, and the title of my book is Abuse Hidden Behind the Badge. So we must speak strongly about what has taken place, not only in the city of Philadelphia, but this goes on all around the United States. I was very close friends with Crystal Brain Justin. Her father got a bill that was passed that I tried to get passed here, and it would not get passed. But we have to make sure that we give our women and our men that support that they need when it involves domestic violence. Is already a serious issue, but domestic violence involving a police officer is even more severe because they do not get that order and we are ignored. So I'm hoping that one day you will communicate with me directly and I can share more information with you in regards to police officer involved in domestic violence.
Yeah. And let me also say that the Citizens Police Oversight Commission can also help you if you have a problem where you feel like you weren't treated right by police. You can also contact them and see if they can assist you in that matter.
Oh,
Definitely.
thank you.
Intimate partner violence, it's very specific to every person. Everybody's situation is different, even though there can be a lot of overlaps. And it's also something that we know intimate partner violence, 50, 60 years ago, the resources, the laws, everything is very different than it is now. Maybe not exactly where we'd like to be, but things are changing and have changed incrementally in the last 50 or 60 years, quite a lot. So things that happened 10 years ago may not be the case now, or they may be slightly different, but that's definitely why, getting in contact with advocates is really helpful. But we know that there are lots of people who have that history of bad experiences that are absolutely true and really difficult to reconcile with, giving people advice or trying to get people to get connected to resources that maybe you had a bad experience with in the past.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like we have another question, another hand raised. Looks like Marlene Smith. Marlene, yep, there we go.
Sorry, hi, this is Marlene Smith. I'm sorry, and I want to thank I don't know the lady's name who has spoke, but I appreciate that because I was in a similar position and I am a city employee, and my abuser was also not a city employee but involved and knew higher up people. And when that situation occurred, it was difficult for me to get help, and I wasn't in my right. I'm also diabetic, so I was not during that time. My levels was up, and I could not really compute during that time. And I was getting out of the situation, and I was able to contact the police and everything. And from the police not being trained on how to handle stuff. My family got there, my family didn't get there in time or whatever, but I had great neighbors who witnessed everything, and I was able to get out of the situation. But when I went down to CJC to file the restraining order, because they knew these people, that was the Majestic and everything, they basically shunned me and turned me around. This is my second time. The first time I went to the 15th and Arch, where you go, and the guy turned me around. My brother took me. I was trying to find a restraining order then, and they told me no, it wasn't physical or verbal abuse. So my brother was kind of taken back, but he couldn't say much or didn't want to get involved because he's a professional UFC fighter. So he just kind of eliminated himself and was like, just try to get him out your house or whatever. And I was like, I can't do that without a restraining order. So to make a long story short, I was almost going into the process of I contacted Women's Against Abuse, wasn't able to get help due to, I guess that they gave me resources, but the resource they gave me when I went to go, the places was either filled or the income guidelines or whatever. Was stuff like that. And I had to get the union involved. I had to get HR involved. And it was to the point where I was about to be moving out of the city. And in order to move out of the city, you have to get the mayor involved to sign for you to live outside of the city if you're involved with domestic violence. So I wound up being able, once I got the union involved, I was able to get go back, file to get him out of my place. But by then everything was damaged, tore, everything. But I was able to get victims compensation. It was a person in the courts from victim compensation who helped me with the paperwork. It began to, and then it turned into criminal because they wound up stalking me. It just was I feel where the lady came from. When you have someone in a higher position, police officer, it's very difficult for us. Thank God I'm alive because some people don't make it out. It's very difficult for women, and men are victims too, for women who are victims to get that help when they have police officers, pillars of the community, et cetera, that are the abusers. So my question was, and I didn't mean to send my thing anonymously. I'm not anonymous. My name is Marlena Smith, and I do share my story. So I was asking, will there be any training for police officers and policies in place for police officers to follow when involving victims of domestic abuse who have abusers as police officers, pillars in a community, et cetera? Because to go back, it was a police officer who came, and this woman basically looked at me as if I was I don't know if it was a stereotype or whatever, but because of I'm an African American woman, I'm tall, and the area where I lived in, I guess she thought I couldn't be out there, but she didn't know who I was. Not just who I was as a person, just who I am, period. And I had to wind up calling the sergeant out there. You know what I'm saying? So when the sergeant came and everything, and the person that I know that in that department had came, I don't know what they did, but however, I never seen her again. But that it was very terrible how she treated me as the victim. My neighbors had to let this woman know, like, I'm the victim. You know, it was just, and let them know like the whole situation, and it just was crazy how it went. So I just want to know, will there be training for police officers when they have how do they handle that? And will they be training for these organizations for when they do have people or these pillars that are the abusers to us, to the victims? How will they handle that situation, or will they be getting training on it?
Ms. Smith, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for asking a question, and also to our Commissioner Thomas. I just wanted to just share a little bit of information about some of the things that CPOC is hoping to do, specifically regarding officer-involved domestic violence, which all of us know is a very unique and very specific type of domestic violence that can be quite complex, because as many of you have shared, police officers are in positions of authority, and they have a specific position, you know, in the community. And so to Commissioner Thomas, when I first reached out to Liz and talked to her, I did mention you. I shared with her that one of our commissioners was very, very committed to domestic violence and was an officer-involved domestic violence advocate. And so we talked a little bit about how her agency and CPOC can get together, specifically with some of our policy folks and outreach, to talk about what the police department's policies are for officers that are involved in domestic violence incidents, whether they're the abuser, whether they are the victim, because my understanding is PPD has some very specific rules if officers are involved. But we really wanted to talk about some ways that we could look at those policies and see if there are things that need to change, if we could talk about community messaging, and just really sharing just how important this issue is and how sometimes it's often overlooked when you talk about domestic violence as a whole. So I'm hoping, Commissioner Thomas, that you will join us and be a part of some of those conversations. But I did want to let you know that I did mention you to Liz when we first met. So we're hoping to do some more work around that very specific issue.
Don't see any other questions or hands raised.
So
Oh,
I did see a question in the Q&A. So someone asked, are there any resources and resource groups for men that are being abused by women? And I answered that in the Q&A, but I do want to say it out loud, that all domestic violence services for survivors are open to any gender. Some of the organizations, for example, Women Against Abuse, are gendered in the way that their organizations are named. But that's because in the 1970s, a group of women came together and said, we are against abuse, we want to do something about it. And we're a group of women, so we're naming it Women Against Abuse. But they have served people of all genders for a long time. And all services for survivors are open to everyone, and federally they are required to do that. So just wanted to clarify that. And I also saw that someone asked, if we suspect a loved one is a stalker, is there any advice or protocol for confronting them? And I would say, no, not necessarily, because Every situation is different. And there may be somebody, a loved one is a stalker and, you know, their behavior is just kind of getting a little bit concerning, or it may be a lot concerning. So that may be a situation that even if it's like, it's your brother that you're concerned about how they're treating their partner, you could still call the Philadelphia Domestic Violence Hotline and say like, hey, I'm concerned about my brother. The things that he is telling me are really disturbing, or the things that I've observed are disturbing. So I would like, you know, just your advice on how to handle that. But also think about like, if the person who is being stalked, if contacting the brother to confront them about it may put them in more danger, you want to balance the safety of the victim of domestic abuse in that situation. So again, anytime that you are concerned about someone's behavior, I do recommend reaching out for help. And the domestic violence hotline can be a good resource for anybody, even if you're just looking for information, just looking to get pointed in the right direction. But every situation is different. Stalkingawareness.org also has a lot of really helpful resources about stalking. And hopefully, if you have a good relationship with that person that you're concerned about, that having somebody in their life who can say like, hey, that's not cool. We're not going to message your ex 500 times in the middle of the night. That behavior is not good. Having people in their lives who can reinforce that that's not okay is really important as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry so much. I wanted to emphasize on something. First of all, Talia, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to working more. One of the things I want to share with our community and with everyone, and I'm sure Ms. Pride and Mr. Gallagher would agree with me, domestic violence not only affects the survivor, but affects their children. And this is a lifetime of healing for the survivor. You know, there will always be flashbacks for the survivor. There will always, you know, be afraid of, you know, if something is still going to happen. But mainly I worry about the children and what kind of effect that it has on our children. So I do hope that that some policy and procedure is changed within the police department, but policy and procedure change in a whole, that realizing that not only does it survive, that is it affects the survivor, but it affects the children. And that is one of my biggest concern is our children. So thank you so much for I didn't mean to interrupt, but I do appreciate your time and allowing me to express that as a survivor and as a compassionate and empathetic woman that I am. You know, I want to do everything I can until the time is for me to go home, that I can help as much as I can for everyone. So I can ramble on, so I'm going to put myself on mute now. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you to our first two speakers and everyone that shared. We have another speaker, and I know we're cutting it close on time. Our next speaker is Tyrone Green from PPD's Special Victims Unit.
Good evening, everyone, and it's an honor and privilege to be with you all. Just before I begin, let me just give some clarity. The police department is doing some training for victims. They have sensitivity training because of what's been going on, as the two ladies have testified about their experiences. The police department now has offered and given training to police officers to have empathy for women that's been abused or victims that's been abused. And also, if I'm not mistaken, if a person makes a report to police involving another police officer, a supervisor is to be called, and that supervisor is to contact the Internal Affairs Division. So that's where it's out of patrol's hands and out of detective divisions. The Internal Affairs gets involved, and also the district attorney's office gets involved. That's been going on, if I'm not mistaken, at least the past 10 years. And so normally what happens is an officer may kind of not shy over just because of what the two ladies then talked about, but now there's a protocol that has to take place. And so reports are being made because of that. So just to give you clarity and let you know that something is being done as of now. I just thank you all for being part of this. Some of the stuff I'm going to talk about, Mr. Gallagher and Ms. Pride had already went through, but I'm just going to give you some information and more details about stalking. Can we go to the next slide real quick? And this is just a presentation by myself. Next slide. Some background information. I've been with the Special Victims. I currently work for the Special Victims Child Abuse Unit. I've been in the police department. March will be 34 years. I've been with Special Victims over 22 years. I investigate children that have been physically and sexually abused in the city, county, Philadelphia. Our reports come from children from the time they birth until the date before they turn 18. So even if a child or an adult that said they were sexually assaulted or physically assaulted when they were a juvenile, there are time statute that's in place. But if it happened when they were a child, we have to do an investigation and turn it over to the DA's office, determine that prosecution is warranted. Next slide. And so real quick, and I believe it was talked about it before, but here's the actual crimes code for stalking. It's crimes code 2709.1, and the offense defines the person commits the crime of stalking when a person is either engages in a course of conduct or repeatedly commits acts towards another person, including following the person without proper authority under circumstances which demonstrates either an intent to place such other person in reasonable fear or bodily injury to cause substantial emotional distress to such other person, or engages in a course of conduct or repeatedly communicates to another person under circumstances which demonstrates or communicate either an intent to place such other person in reasonable fear of bodily injury or cause substantial emotional distress to such other person. Next slide, please. Here we're going to talk about what happens about a venue. Venue is pretty much a location, because the first one talks about an offense committed under this section may be deemed to have been committed at either a place which communication or communications were made at the place where the communication or communication received, such as like a workplace, or acts indicating a course of contact which occur more than one jurisdiction may be used in any other jurisdiction, which an act occurred in evidence of a continuing pattern or conduct or course of conduct. And I believe, to give an example, out of state, somebody lives in Pennsylvania, another person lives in New Jersey. So that's a course of conduct in another jurisdiction. That also involves stalking as well. Next slide, please. What is a stalker? Well, the definition pretty much talks about a stalker is someone who intentionally and repeatedly follows, tries to contact, harasses, and or intimidates another person. Webster defines this as a person who pursues someone obsessively and aggressively to the point of harassment. Also, stalking generally refers to repeatedly harassing or threatening behavior. Next slide, please. And it varies from state to state. Laws, while the federal government in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and U.S. territories have enacted criminal laws to address stalking, the legal definition for stalking varies across jurisdictions. State laws vary regarding the elements of victim, fear, and emotional distress, as well as the requisite intent of the stalker. Some state laws specify that the victim must have been frightened by the stalker, while others require that only the stalking behavior would have caused a reasonable person to experience fear. In addition, states vary regarding what level of fear is required. Some state laws require prosecutors to establish fear of death or serious bodily harm, while others require only that prosecutors establish that the victim suffered emotional distress. Interstate stalking is defined by federal law. Next slide, please. And so now we have three broad categories of stalking have been defined based on the relationship between the stalker and the victim. We have the intimate or former intimate, and that's pretty much defined as the stalker and victim may be married or divorced, current or former cohabitants, serious or cause sexual partners or former sexual partners. Now, 70 to 80% of stalking falls in this category. And then we have the acquaintance stalker. This stalker is the victim and knows each other casually. They may be neighbors or coworkers. They may even have dated once or twice, but not sexual partners. And then we have the stranger stalking. The stalker and the victim do not know each other at all. The behavior is categorized by stalkers who develop a love, obsession, or fixation of another person whom they have no personal relationship. Cases involving public figures or celebrities fall into this category. Next slide, please. Now, the Justice Department notes that all 50 states and the District of Columbia have general stalking laws, some which can be applied to cyber stalking offenses, which is pretty much common current now. And that 16 states have added laws specifically targeting cyber stalking. Now, the department speculates that there may be potentially tens or even hundreds of thousands of victims of recent cyber stalking incidents in the United States. Next slide, please. Prevalence of stalking and its victims. Now, we talked today, I believe, let's get into this. Women are the primary primary victims of stalking, and men are primary perpetrators. Stalking is more prevalent previously thought. 8% of surveyed women and 2% surveyed men said that they were stalked at some time in their lifetime. They continued 1 million women and 371,000 men are stalked annually in the United States, according to the Department of Justice. Now, 60% of women are stalked by spouses, former spouses, living partners, and date as a whole. 70% of men are stalked by acquaintance or strangers. Now, the seriousness of this problem is reflected by the fact that almost 1/3 of women, and we stated this before, are killed in the US or murdered by their husbands or boyfriend. As many as 90% are stalked before they're murdered. Next slide, please. Here's some behaviors. They make unwanted phone calls, sending unsolicited or unwanted letters or emails, following, spying on the victim, showing up at places without a legitimate reason, waiting at places for the victims, leaving unwanted items, presents of flowers, we just talked about that a little while ago, posting information or spreading rumors about the victim on the internet in a public place or by word of mouth. Next slide, please. The offender gender, now it says males were likely to report being stalked by a male as a female offender. 40% of male stalking victims stated that the offender was a female, while 41% of the male victims stated that the offender was another male. Female victims of stalking were significantly more likely to be stalked by a male, 67%, while rather than the female, which is 24% of the offender. Now, stalking is unlike most crimes because the course of conduct is designed to create fear in another person. It does not necessarily require that the victim come in contact with the offender. For example, a victim may receive repeated threatening correspondence without knowing the source of the communication. 16% of male stalking victims and approximately 10% of female stalking victims were not able to identify the gender of the offender. Next slide, please. Cyber stalking and electric monitoring. And it says more than 1 in 4 stalking victims reported some form of cyber stalking was used, such as email, which is 83%, or instant messaging, which is 35%. Electric monitoring was used to stalk 1 in 13 victims. Video or digital cameras were equally likely as listening devices or bugs to be used electronically monitoring victims. It says global positioning systems, GPS technology, comprise about 1/10 of electronic monitoring of stalking victims. Next slide, please. Here's some safety awareness. And we just stuff that the police, everybody pretty much try to tell victims to do. Change your routine by using different bank or grocery store and taking different routes to and from work or school. Do not travel alone. Use a buddy system such as much as possible. Stay in public areas as much as possible. Notify people in your life, such as your friends, family members, coworkers, or supervisors about your stalking concerns. Develop a code word or use when a stalker is present when you may be in danger. Install a home security system such as deadbolts, windows, locks, or gates, visible security cameras, and motion-activated outdoor lights. And as always, make a police report and get a protective order against the stalker when necessary. Next slide, please. And that's pretty much about it. If you might have any questions or thoughts, you can do this now. And then my information is on the next slide. If you might have any questions, want to talk to me personally about it for the next slide.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Green.
Okay.
We have 2 questions, and then after these 2 questions, I'm going to open it up to anyone else that may have any questions. So the first question we have, are domestic violence records ever made public? And if I'm dating someone new and want to see if they have a domestic violence record, is there any way to verify that?
As far as I know, reports are not made public at all. No reports of victims have ever been made public. And so to answer that question, your second question was what now?
If I'm dating someone new and want to see if they have a domestic violence history, is there any way to verify that?
There are several websites to check on if anybody has a criminal background. You can just go on certain websites for free and try to find out that the police department does not get out information, but there are plenty of websites out there to look into to find out past criminal records and stuff like that.
Thank you. And then the second question we have is, if I believe that I'm being cyber stalked online and the person is sending me unsolicited photos of themselves, I've asked them to stop and have blocked them, but they keep sending me messages from different social media pages. What kind of information should I gather in order to contact the police to file a complaint?
I would say everything possible that you have on that information. As much information you can download and save on a flash drive, say that information, contact your nearest detective unit, because I believe they do have a domestic officer, domestic detective involved in all that. And even here in Special Victims, we have a cyber crimes officer that investigates cyber crimes, cyber stalking incidents. So if it's a Special Victims incident, we would investigate it. But if it's domestic, then the local detective division would handle it, such as like North, that handles the 39th, 35th, 14th, and the 5th district. So those detective division of occurrence would be able to handle that part.
Awesome. And so is that something they should go directly to their local district for, or can they come directly to SVU for that?
They can contact the police department, 911. The police officer will make the report, and then they'll contact the either Special Victims Unit or their detective division of occurrence.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And now, if anyone in the comment section has any questions or concerns, please feel free.
Don't see any hands raised.
Okie dokie. If there's no more questions or concerns, we can turn it over to Anthony Arachi for our closing remarks.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Our next public commissioner meeting will be on February 6th at 6 p.m. and our next community town hall will be on February 20th at 6 p.m. Stay tuned for links and more info on topics and presentations. And thank you to our guests from the Office of Domestic Violence Strategies, Women Against Abuse, and PPD's SVU. It's very cold out there. Please, everyone, try to stay warm and be safe, and we'll see you all next time. Have a great night.
Good night.